Viewer discretion is advised.
April 10th, 2001, 8:42 in the morning. Scottsdale, Arizona. A house explodes with such force that neighbors a half-mile away feel their walls shake. Flames shoot 20 feet into the air. Firefighters arrive to find secondary explosions, rifle ammunition, paint cans, preventing them from getting close. When they finally breach the home, they discover 3 bodies. A mother, 2 children, all in their beds. The father is gone. When investigators realized what they were looking at, one thing became clear. The fire wasn't the tragedy. It was the cover-up. In today's documentary, you're going to see how a church-going family man became one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. You'll learn how Robert and Mary Fischer appeared to be the perfect couple to everyone around them and what was really happening behind closed doors. You'll discover the forensic evidence that proved this wasn't an accident, but a meticulously planned execution. You'll hear about the camping trip 2 weeks before the murders where Fischer may have been rehearsing his escape. And you'll find out why, 25 years later, investigators are still receiving tips every single week, and why new witnesses discovered in 2024 completely changed the timeline of that final night. By the end, you'll understand why some detectives believe Robert Fischer is still alive, hiding in plain sight, and why others think his body has been in those Arizona woods all along. Robert William Fischer was born on April 13, 1961, in Brooklyn, New York. His father, William Fischer, was a banker. His mother was Jan Howell. Robert had 2 sisters. When Robert was 15 years old, his parents divorced. According to friends from high school, the separation was bitter, turbulent, the kind that leaves scars. One friend later described Robert as very bitter about it. Years later, Fischer would confide to co-workers that his life would have been completely different if his mother hadn't left. After the divorce, Robert and his sisters moved to Arizona with their father. They attended Saguaro High School in Tucson. Robert joined the United States Navy. He attempted to become a Navy SEAL. He failed. He left the military in 1982 and became a firefighter in California, but a back injury forced him to retire. He moved to Arizona and started working in the medical field, first as a weed sprayer, then as a surgical catheter technician, and eventually as a respiratory therapist. In 1987, Robert married Mary Cooper. Mary was kind, patient, active in their church. Friends described her as sweet, devoted, always trying to keep the peace. She worked various jobs over the years, including positions as a medical technician. Together, they had 2 children. Brittany, born in 1988. Bobby, born in 1990. To their neighbors, to their church community, the Fischers looked perfect. They attended Scottsdale Baptist Church regularly. Mary led the children's ministry. The family went on camping trips. They smiled in photos. Robert mowed his paralyzed neighbor's lawn without being asked. But inside the Fischer home, things were different. Robert was controlling. He insisted the walls could only be painted white. Only a few pictures were allowed on the walls. Friends described him as tense, oddly emotionless, a man who walked with an erect posture, chest out, because of his back injury. Mary told friends Robert was obsessed with sex and money. He complained constantly. In 1998, Robert admitted to having an affair. He told coworkers about a one-night encounter with someone he met at a massage parlor. Mary kicked him out of the house. Robert went camping alone for several days. He wrote Mary a letter, telling her he couldn't live without her. He threatened to take his own life. When he returned, he promised to be a godly father and husband. He started carrying cards with Bible verses in his pocket, but the tension never left. Neighbors reported hearing the couple scream at each other. One former neighbor, Wade Rinksock, later told investigators they did not have a happy marriage. They screamed constantly. Everybody heard it. You could hear it in the house next door. And you never really heard him scream, which is kind of weird. You always heard his wife screaming. Things like, "You're worthless. I could have done better than you." We should get a divorce. Robert's behavior outside the home raised red flags too. On hunting trips, friends watched him kill an elk, then smear its blood all over his face. On one trip, he sneaked up behind a family that was picnicking and fired his gun into the air. Years before the murders, he shot a stray pit bull, claiming it attacked his Labrador, but police believed he orchestrated the encounter because he wanted to shoot the dog. In late 2000, Robert contracted a urinary tract infection. He told a coworker it was from visiting a masseuse. He denied they'd had sex, but he was paranoid Mary would find out. Mary told multiple friends in the weeks before her death that she was going to divorce Robert. Robert's pastor later said he was adamant about not going through a divorce or putting his family through a divorce. He could not live without his family. Robert Fischer had lived through his parents' divorce as a teenager. He wasn't going to let it happen to him. Before we go further, drop a comment right now. Do you think it's possible to truly know what's happening inside someone else's marriage? Just type yes or no. April 9th, 2001. The Fischer family attended an event at Brittany's school, Supai Middle School. Brittany, 12 years old, had recently been inducted into the National Junior Honor Society. She played basketball. Bobby, 10, was a student at Pima Elementary. He played baseball. Friends remembered him as a goofball with a unique sense of humor. Witnesses at the school event later told police they noticed tension between Robert and Mary. That night, around 10 p.m., a neighbor heard a loud argument coming from inside the Fischer home. Police would later theorize that the murders took place between 9:30 p.m. and 10:15 p.m. At 10:43 p.m., Robert Fischer appeared on an ATM camera at a bank about half a mile from his house. He withdrew $280, the maximum amount allowed at the time. Mary's Toyota 4Runner was visible in the background. For years, investigators believed Fischer fled immediately after withdrawing that money, that he had as much as a 10 or 12-hour head start on law enforcement. But in 2024, a podcast investigation uncovered two previously uncontacted witnesses. One witness saw Mary's 4Runner parked outside the Fischer residence at 3:30 in the morning on April 10th. Another witness saw it at 5:30 a.m. This meant Robert Fischer didn't flee after the ATM. He went home. He was still in that house 7 hours after withdrawing the money. And that changed everything about the timeline. Early morning, April 10th, 2001. Inside the Fischer home, Robert severed the natural gas line from the back of the house's furnace. He poured an accelerant throughout the home, over the floors, over the furniture, over the bodies of his wife and children. Then he lit a candle in a lower area of the house. The gas accumulated. It descended toward the flame. Fischer had engineered a delayed fuse, one that would give him just enough time to disappear before the explosion. At 8:42 a.m., the Fischer home exploded. The blast was so powerful it collapsed a brick wall. Houses within a half-mile radius had their frames rattled. Neighbors rushed outside with garden hoses, trying to extinguish the flames before firefighters arrived. The fire reached 20 feet into the sky. When firefighters finally entered the home, they found the burned remains of Mary Fischer, age 38, and her two children, Brittany, age 12, and Bobby, age 10. All three were in their beds. All three had their throats slashed from ear to ear. The wounds were so deep the children were nearly decapitated. Mary Fischer also had a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Execution style. Robert Fischer was nowhere to be found. Neither was the family dog, a Labrador named Blue. And neither was Mary's Toyota 4Runner. But investigators discovered something else inside the home, a fireproof safe that had survived the explosion. Inside the safe was an empty revolver case. The gun was missing. On April 14, 2001, 4 days after the explosion, the Arizona Department of Public Safety issued a statewide bulletin. Robert William Fischer was officially named a person of interest. He was the only person who has ever been named as such in this case. On April 20, 2001, 10 days after the murders, a camper in the Tonto National Forest, about 100 miles north of Scottsdale, near the town of Young, made a discovery. Mary Fisher's Toyota 4Runner. It was parked deep in the woods, in a remote area Fischer was known to frequent for hunting and recreation. The vehicle had been wiped clean. No fingerprints. An Oakland Raiders hat identical to the one Fischer wore in the ATM footage was inside. Near the passenger door, investigators found a pile of human excrement. And guarding the vehicle, hungry and agitated, was Blue, the Fischer family's Labrador. The dog was alive. Robert Fischer was not there. Immediately, a massive manhunt was launched. More than 100 officers from local, state, and county agencies descended on the area. Helicopters circled overhead. SWAT teams. Search and rescue units. They scoured the mountains, canyons, and caves of the Tonto National Forest. The area was brutal. Dense woods. Rugged terrain. Networks of underground caves stretching for miles. And snow, enough to make investigators move carefully to avoid contaminating tracks. The manhunt lasted 3 days. They found nothing. No trace of Robert Fischer. But investigators weren't surprised. Fischer was an outdoorsman, a survivalist. He knew these woods. He'd hunted here for years. Some believe he'd even explored the caves before, possibly during a camping trip just 2 weeks before the murders. One man, Herb Greenbeck, went camping with Robert Fischer that weekend. Years later, Greenbeck told documentary filmmakers he believed Fischer had an ulterior motive for that trip. Fischer asked strange questions. He seemed to be studying the area. Greenbeck now believes Fischer was rehearsing his escape. On July 19, 2001, a state arrest warrant was issued in Phoenix. Robert Fischer was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson of an occupied structure. On June 29, 2002, Fischer was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. He was the 475th fugitive to receive that designation. The FBI offered a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to his capture. By April 2003, the FBI had received hundreds and hundreds of leads. But every single reported sighting was either inconclusive or false. In February 2004, Canadian police arrested a man in Vancouver who bore a striking physical resemblance to Fischer. He had a missing tooth, where Fischer had a gold bicuspid. He had a surgical scar on his back, just like Fischer. The man was held for approximately 1 week, but his fingerprints didn't match. The man was eventually identified by a relative. It wasn't Robert Fischer. In 2012, the FBI alerted local law enforcement that Fischer may have been living in the area near where Mary's car was discovered. Nothing came of it. In 2015, the FBI released age-enhanced photos showing what Fischer might look like at 54 years old. Tips continued to pour in. Detectives continued to follow every lead. But no confirmed sighting of Robert Fischer has ever been made. And the case went cold. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. Robert Fischer's co-workers at Mayo Clinic Hospital in Scottsdale noticed something in the days before the murders. Fischer was crying. Multiple people saw it. One co-worker later described him as broken. Fischer told a hunting companion he was renewing his commitment to his faith and marriage because he could not live without his family. Psychologists later noted this language, could not live without, as a potential hint that Fischer would consider taking his own life over divorce. But there's a critical distinction here. Fischer didn't just say he'd take his own life. He said he couldn't live without his family. And when Mary told friends she was planning to leave him, Fischer made sure his family would never leave. Mary had confided in multiple friends that she feared Robert. One friend, Herb Greenbeck, recalled a time when Robert called Mary and asked her to meet him at a cabin up north. Mary wanted someone to go with her. She was afraid he would do something to her. Fischer's behavior on outdoor trips became increasingly alarming. Friends noticed him becoming more erratic, more aggressive. The blood-smearing incident, the random gunfire, the orchestrated pit bull shooting. And yet, to the outside world, Robert Fischer maintained the facade. He attended church. He participated in the men's ministry. He smiled. He helped neighbors. He worked a respectable job as a respiratory therapist. Pastor Greg Contelmo, who counseled Robert and Mary through their marital problems, later said, I wouldn't say there was any one emotion that really presented itself other than he was just quiet. To think that I was not just his pastor but his friend, we would talk, and I knew of some of the difficulties, and yet no concept whatsoever he would go there. The biggest contradiction? Robert Fischer told friends and family he would never put his children through a divorce. And he didn't. He murdered them instead. If you're still watching, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Cases like this take weeks of research, and your subscription helps us keep bringing you these deep investigations. Now, let's keep going. Detective John Heinzelman has been assigned to the Robert Fischer case since 2014. He's reviewed every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every tip that's come in, and tips still come in regularly, sometimes daily. Heinzelman told reporters in 2021, "This is, by far, the most heinous crime that we've had here in Scottsdale." The forensic evidence painted a clear picture. The gas line had been deliberately severed. The candle was intentionally lit. The accelerant was poured with purpose. The explosion was timed to give Fischer a head start and to destroy as much evidence as possible. But fires don't burn bullets. The bullet lodged in Mary Fischer's skull survived the explosion. It confirmed she'd been shot execution-style in the back of the head. The autopsy revealed something chilling. All three victims had their throats slashed from ear to ear. The wounds were so deep they nearly decapitated the children. Mary was shot first, then her throat was cut. Investigators believe the murders happened while the family was asleep or just waking up. There was no sign of a struggle. FBI profilers analyzed Fischer's behavior and psychology. They noted his intense fear of divorce, rooted in the trauma of his parents' separation when he was 15. They pointed to his controlling behavior, his need to maintain the image of a perfect family, his religious convictions against divorce. According to Dr. Tess Neal, a forensic psychologist who reviewed the publicly available details of the case, Fischer likely experienced what's known as narcissistic injury, a profound threat to his self-image and identity. If there were indications that this marriage may have been coming to some kind of end, he really just did not want that to happen, Neal explained. He did not want his children to have to live through the kind of divorce-related trauma that he himself had experienced. The FBI described Fischer as arrogant, cocky, a know-it-all, and a loner. Fischer's sister, Jean Roundtree, gave a public statement years after the murders. She said, "I can't picture Robert being alive and not contacting us for so many years. So, I have to believe there's another answer out there."
She believes her brother is dead.
But the FBI, for years, operated under the assumption he was alive. Retired Detective T.J. Giron, who worked the case from day one, said in 2021, "I believe he's still alive. I actually believe he's the John List of our generation," a reference to another family annihilator who successfully evaded capture for nearly 2 decades. Current Detective John Heinzelman holds the opposite view. "I'm leaning toward the fact that he is not alive," he said. Only so much as to say that we've never had one verified sighting. The case file for Robert Fischer spans more than 400 pages. And in August 2024, a new podcast investigation uncovered witnesses who had never been contacted by police. Witnesses who saw Mary's forerunner at the Fischer home hours after the ATM withdrawal, completely changing the accepted timeline. In a moment, I'm going to tell you about the decision that shocked everyone in 2021, a decision the FBI made about Robert Fischer's status that left investigators divided.
But first, I need to ask you something.
This case has haunted Scottsdale for over 2 decades. Families were torn apart. A community was shattered. And 3 innocent people, Mary, Brittany, and Bobby, never got justice. If you believe cases like this deserve to be told, and if you think Robert Fischer should still be found, leave a comment right now telling me, what do you think happened to him? Your engagement helps push this video to more people. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching has information that could finally solve this case. Now, let's continue. On November 3rd, 2021, the FBI made an announcement that stunned investigators and the public alike. Robert William Fischer was being removed from the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. He was replaced by Yulan Adonai Archagacarias, the alleged leader of the MS-13 gang in Honduras. Fischer became only the 11th person since 1950 to be removed from the 10 most wanted list prior to apprehension, death, or dismissal of charges. The FBI explained, "One of the criteria for placement on the list is the need for publicity to help locate and capture the subject. Because the extensive publicity Fischer's case received during its nearly 20 years on the list has not resulted in his successful location and/or capture, the case no longer fulfills that requirement." The FBI also stated there was no evidence Fischer had engaged in any additional illegal activity since 2001, meaning he was no longer considered a continued danger to communities. But the FBI was clear. Fischer was still wanted. The investigation was still active. The arrest warrant was still valid. And the $100,000 reward was still in place. For Detective John Heinzelman, the removal didn't change anything. "By no means does this mean the case is now over or the case has ended," he said. "We continue to work it." Retired Detective T.J. Giron was less pleased. "I'm not happy about it," he said. "I believe it can never have too much publicity." But Heinzelman had a different perspective. He told reporters he believed Fischer was likely dead. "My personal opinion is time is against us to believe he's still alive," he said. After 20 years, the Fischer case is still very much active. "I had 2 different calls this morning, one from California and one from Canada." The theories about what happened to Robert Fischer fall into 3 main categories. The first theory is he died in the wilderness. Fischer was 39 years old when he disappeared. He was an experienced outdoorsman, but the Arizona wilderness is unforgiving. It's possible he took his own life in the woods, and his body was never found. Extensive searches of the area turned up nothing, but they only searched one out of dozens of nearby caves. Some investigators believe Fischer's body is still out there, somewhere in the Tonto National Forest, decomposed beyond recognition. The second is he's living under a new identity. Fischer had survival skills. He was methodical. The explosion was clearly planned. Some believe he also planned his escape, that he had cash reserves, possibly had help from someone, and successfully started a new life somewhere else. Tips have come in from across the world. Sightings in Canada. Sightings in Mexico. Sightings in rural areas across the United States. None have been confirmed. If Fischer is alive today, he would be 63 years old. And the third is that he's been hiding in plain sight. This is the theory some detectives find most compelling. Fischer could be living somewhere in North America, using a different name, working a low-profile job, blending in. He was ordinary-looking. Average height. Average weight. Nothing particularly distinctive about him, except for his erect posture from the back injury. In 2015 and again in 2024, forensic artists created age progression images showing what Fischer might look like today. The images depict a man with gray hair, a weathered face, perhaps a beard. He could be anyone. It's easy in cases like this to become so focused on the fugitive that we forget the people who are lost. Mary Fischer was 38 years old. She was kind, devoted. She led the children's ministry at Scottsdale Baptist Church. She worked hard. She loved her children. She was trying to find a way out of a difficult marriage. Brittany Fischer was 12 years old. She played basketball. She'd just been inducted into the National Junior Honor Society. She had her whole life ahead of her. Bobby Fischer was 10 years old. He played baseball. Friends remembered him as funny, goofy, a kid with a unique sense of humor. Every year, Mary's family holds memorials. They've never stopped searching for answers. The community of Scottsdale was shaken. The cul-de-sac where the Fischers lived turned into a memorial site in the days after the murders. Balloons, signs, photos, flowers. For the detectives who worked the scene, this case left scars. Several described it as the worst scene of their entire career. The images don't fade. As of January 2026, Robert William Fischer is still wanted by the FBI. He faces 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson of an occupied structure. The FBI's $100,000 reward remains active. The case is open. Tips are still being investigated. Scottsdale Police Department continues to receive calls every week. If Robert Fischer is alive, he's now 63 years old. He may look completely different from the man captured on that ATM camera in 2001. If he's dead, his body has never been found. Either way, Mary, Brittany, and Bobby Fischer never received justice. And their killer, whether alive or dead, has never been held accountable. Robert William Fischer may have escaped the fire, but he didn't escape the truth. If this case moved you, if you think it deserves to be shared, hit that share button right now. Send this to someone who follows true crime. Post it on your social media. The more people who see this, the greater the chance someone out there has information that could finally bring closure to this case. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more investigations like this one. Now tell me in the comments, do you think Robert Fischer is still alive? And where do you think he is?